DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia. Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site, and you can find out all about our podcast over on dogworksradio.com. Be sure to check us out on our social media channels. We did change some of them. We are now at First Paw Media. We're doing that because we host several podcasts, and we want to make sure that they're all under the same roof. And I am joined today by my co-host, Toni Reitter. Toni, how's it going tonight?
Going really well. I think we're getting close to summer. It's nearing 60 degrees here. I'm actually in a tank top and shorts today. So it's really nice. Everything's greening up here. So we're definitely getting further away from mushing season and getting closer to fishing season.
We are, and I'm sure that people will start coming into your neck of the woods in masses if they have not already. But it's a beautiful day up here in Willow as well. We have just a couple of splotches of snow left over in the shady areas of our yard, but now it is time for everything to dry up. And we are recording this on May 18th, and I didn't know if you know this, Toni, but the Iditarod is only 289 days, 15 hours, and 56 minutes from right now. So we are definitely talking about next year's Iditarod, and today we're going to cover a couple of interesting stories. One of them about the mushers that had lost some of their prize money and their spots on last year's Iditarod. Then we have an update about the Jesse Holmes situation. I know we talked about that in the last couple of episodes. So, Toni, let's jump right into the release that came out earlier this week about Rule 37 musher appeals. What do you know? Then we'll jump into it.
Sure. So I think the last time we talked about this, we had mentioned that the appeals board had 45 days from the time that they received the appeal to come to a decision. Last time we recorded a podcast, we had done the math, and it was, if it wasn't right there at 45, it was getting pretty close because we weren't sure of the exact date of when the appeal was made to that board. And so then, sure enough, soon after our recording, here comes the news that they've got a decision. And it's a little surprising. They reversed the decision. They gave Michelle and Milla their spots back. And then they were given the same fine that Riley Deich was given for also sheltering dogs in the cabin. He was given a fine of $1,000, I believe. And so that's what both Michelle Phillips and Milla Porcelain were given instead of the harsher penalty of not only losing the prize money, but those placements that they originally, that they had when they finished in Nome. So for the most part, it seems like most fans are happy with the decision. I've not seen a statement from Michelle or Milla about that, or Riley. Not sure if Riley had anything. I know he said he wasn't going to appeal, but I'm sure he has feelings on how everything went. But I have seen some comments from other Iditarod mushers saying that they weren't happy with, not only not happy with the decision, but they weren't happy with the statement that the Iditarod made because it totally negated another rule where, or at least the explanation that one of the reasons why Riley did not lose placement was you can't give a time penalty for the run in from White Mountain to Nome. Now, I haven't actually read the rule book to see which rule they're talking about, so I probably shouldn't have even mentioned that. But that's what I've seen over the last week.
And of course, when those places were put back into place, that affected some spots before and after. And I know that it included Matt Hall, Mitch Seavey, and Lev Schwartz, who all were sort of in that mix there. And it either moved those guys up or down a couple of spots. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. They all, I believe, got a couple higher placements. And that's why Milla came so much further down than Michelle, because she finished, I guess, much higher. I can't remember where she finished. But that was one of the discrepancies that had Iditarod just been really not transparent, but if they had explained the decision better in a press release, I think a lot of confusion and fan frustration probably wouldn't exist. Because it makes sense on paper when you look at the explanations that other mushers have had to explain how the decision was made, because it follows, I guess, the math that has happened in the past. But the Iditarod chose not to make a statement at all, and that's where the fan ire kind of grew.
And of course, their statement talks about it's all about the dogs and humane treatment and all that. Do you think that's the sole reason why, or do you think there's some other PR pushback with this?
I think it is. It really did give animal rights groups, and I really hate calling them animal rights, but that's what they see themselves as, and that's their truth. But it did give them a foothold because the Iditarod didn't make a bigger statement, or at least an explanation. They just kind of shrugged their shoulders and went, that's the rule, without really explaining what it meant. And so you saw the national media pick up on it after our local media picked up on it. And all the headlines said, mushers are being penalized for taking care of their dogs, basically is what it boiled down to, which definitely is not the statement Iditarod or any of the mushing races want, and certainly is not what the rule is about. It's definitely about advantages that they saw in races back in the 80s and 90s. So I think most of the decision probably came from PR pushback, and not necessarily because they think the rule is wrong or that it was enforced unfairly. But the statement that they made this week, if they had made that statement at the beginning and just really explained that, what that rule meant, because they do try to explain the rule a little bit in their statement, I think they would have come away a little bit better. You'd still have the anger from the mushers and some of the fans, but I think there wouldn't be the huge uproar that they saw within the fandom.
So I know that they didn't list a ruling of what's going to happen next. But can you speculate or forecast about how this is going to affect something in the future? And maybe it's just an opinion versus a speculation or a forecast. What do you think is going to happen because of this next year?
I think we're going to see when they, announce the rules. I think it typically happens in October. I think we'll probably see a rewording of Rule 37. I would hope that they don't take it away entirely, because then, like we said in earlier broadcasts, that now it's just going to be a race to the different shelter cabins. But I think for the most part, it's not going to affect the overall decision by different mushers to either run the race or not run the race. They're going to gripe about it. They're definitely going to have their opinions at the meeting in June. But I don't see this being a long-term big faux pas for the race. I think it's just going to be what they talk about until something else comes up that annoys them.
And that they will. We always have grumblings, and that's in any sport. Obviously, when you change rules or amend places and all that, that obviously can cause a heck of a hubbub, especially in very close races like this was at this time. So speaking of that, I know that there was an issue in Nome with a couple of these mushers, and it including filing an order with the court. Do you know anything about that?
I didn't even think to look to see what has been going on with that. It was a case of, I guess, domestic violence is how it was charged back in March. But I have not seen any updates on that. I haven't seen local media pick up on it. But we do know that, Iditarod does, when it's brought to their attention and it does go through the court system, they have had in the past in other situations similar to that, they've had the offender jump through quite a few hoops before they can sign up again. But as far as an update on that, I haven't actually even thought to look for one until you just asked now. And I was like, oh yeah, there was something else that I should have been looking at.
Well, maybe we can talk about that the next show. Before we jump into to our other story, it just came to me that in our last episode, we were talking about the Yukon Quest, and that was just a couple of days after the ruling that the Alaska side was pulling out because they weren't happy with the Yukon side. And of course, there was a lot of back and forth there. And since that's been a couple of weeks from now, do you know of anything else that's occurred on the Yukon Quest side, whether it's news, fan reaction, or whatever?
The camps are pretty much set. There's pro-Alaska and there's pro-Canada, and it really depends on, as far as the fans' opinions go, and even some of the mushers, it really just depends on which board you believe or which board members you're friends with, either personally or through social media. I haven't seen anything official past what we talked about 2 weeks ago. But, it's getting to be the summer season, and I think everyone's just kind of trying to lie low and hope most of it blows over. I expect that we're not going to see a resolution, and I think we are just going to see a bunch of races with the Yukon Quest title. But they're going to be run very differently than what we're used to.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how that plays out as well. And I've said this time and time again over the last few years. This is definitely turning into a year-long sport, and of course that's why we're doing a podcast about it. Can you imagine us trying to talk about I don't know, curling in the middle of May or June? I don't think we could probably do that, could we?
We might. I don't know. I mean, I only follow curling every 4 years, but I don't know. Is this the time of year that they start designing their uniforms for the next year? Because those are always fun, especially like Sweden's pants and stuff. They're always fun to watch.
There you go. Maybe we'll have to do an offshoot podcast about international curling. I don't know. Okay, so let's jump over to the other news of the month, if you will. A couple of episodes back, we talked about a incident with one of the Iditarod mushers that occurred as he was getting ready to travel to the Kobuk 440 race, which is a longer mid-distance race held after Iditarod up in northern Alaska, where it's a 440-mile race. And we had a little bit of an incident beforehand. What can you tell us? Bring us up to speed first.
Sure. So for those that maybe didn't hear that podcast or don't remember, Jesse Holmes was in Wasilla at a hotel, and he loose dropped his dogs out of the dog truck and was getting ready to feed them, and apparently was not aware that some of the dogs had taken off and gone down the hill to where some residential homes were, and his dogs ended up attacking a little dog and killing it in its yard. It was tethered. It was doing its own thing in its own yard, and several of his sled dogs decided he looked like a tasty little snack. And of course, this happened right before the Kobuk. So he was off in, I believe, Kotzebue when everything came down. It went through social media and then of course, KTUU picked it up, where the owner shared in graphic detail what happened to their dog, and said that, they had spoken with Jesse. He said that he would make it right, but then they couldn't get a hold of him. And I don't think anybody realized that, he was off in the middle of nowhere where service is non-existent. So then the mayor of Wasilla got involved, I believe it was, and said that, they believed that charges would be forthcoming. And as of April 25th, charges were filed. He was charged with 10 counts of failure to restrain dogs, and then he has 1 count of animal cruelty. So he was in court, according to court view, on the 11th and pled not guilty to all of those charges. And so now they are setting a trial date, but I did not see any of that in the court view files that I was looking up. So it's a tragic situation. I don't think he meant for anything like that to happen. It's one of those freak things. I'm sure he didn't even think about, his dogs leaving the hotel grounds and going somewhere else. So it'll be really interesting to see where this goes. But I'm sure one of the reasons why he's not, taking either a deal or something like that at this point is because of that animal cruelty charge. Because as you pointed out when the news first broke, that if you are found guilty of animal cruelty, that pretty much negates the rest of your racing career.
Yeah, it's a rough one to get across once that happens. So hopefully everything works out on all sides. Of course, the little dog that was killed, and of course with Jesse and the court. So I always have to ask, what's the fans' perspective on this? Because you have the pulse of that much greater than I do. Has there been any talk about that in the last couple of weeks, about that incident or what occurred or whatever?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't seen too much from fans one way or the other. They're more focused on Iditarod and Quest news right now. And so I think Jesse is flying under the radar, which is probably a good thing for all parties involved. It just happened that, I was looking up something else, and it kind of triggered me following down a rabbit hole to see what had been decided, because the last we'd heard that they were investigating, but no charges had been filed yet. And so I was a little late to the party once I remembered to go look. So I decided not to tweet out that information last night. So it'll be interesting for our listeners what they feel. Me personally, as a fan, I don't know Jesse. I've never met or talked with him. I've heard good things. I've heard, neutral things. I've heard rivalry things. But as far as knowing him personally, I don't have any opinion on that. I do think that, this was just a lapse in judgment, and I think some of the charges would stick. I don't know the legal ramifications, but just my gut feeling is it doesn't feel like it's a true animal cruelty case. It's not like he did this maliciously. He wasn't, he didn't say, sick him, go eat that little dog. And so I would hope that the law, allows for that to come into play and that it not stick, because I would hate to see his racing career end just as he's really kicking into high gear and becoming a competitive team out there, to have it come to a crashing halt due to one lapse of judgment.
Right. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that, and hopefully that works out for everybody involved. One quick other story, Tony. I was looking at the Iditarod Facebook page as we were talking, and it looks like right now, starting on the 16th of May, they have their trail mail auction. And I find that interesting because this trail mail harkens way back to the beginnings, of course, of mushing in Alaska and elsewhere, where they carried mail and all kinds of other supplies up and down the trail, and this is sort of a homage to that. What can you tell us about sort of the history of the trail mail on Iditarod, and do you know anything about that process? Does everybody carry it? Is it particular mushers? Can you carry your own mail? What do you know about it?
So the official Iditarod trail mail, I believe, started mostly with the education program, because different classes can send in letters or whatnot, and then the mushers carry it. They sign the envelope and they send it back. And it looks like now they're auctioning off trail mail as well, which I believe they did even back as early as the 70s and 80s. I have trail mail from an Iditarod before I was born. So I'm not really sure exactly when that started, but it is considered promotional material, which is one of the required or mandatory gear items that they do check off the list when the musher gets into Nome. If you remember any of the mushers coming in, if you watched any of the videos, they all hand this big, I think it was green this year, packet, and it's full of trail mail and other things that Iditarod decides that they need to carry, partially for the Iditarod education program, and some of it is for stuff like these auctions that they're doing now around the summertime. They're doing quite a few auctions throughout the year now, which I think is really good because it keeps your interest in the race. And it kind of stretches the purse strings a little bit, I think, because you're more apt to bid on something every few months and win those auctions more frequently than if you're having to do it in all one fell swoop.
And this official promotional items is not the only thing that mushers carry. You often hear of mushers carrying other things of value, whether it be people's ashes or dogs' ashes or special trinkets or all sorts of stuff. Do you happen to know any quick stories about things that people have carried along the trail that you can recall?
Well, Lance Mackey, of course, took his mother's ashes not too long ago down the trail. Pete Kaiser, of course, was carrying Dick Wilmarth's ashes and spread them, I believe, right outside of Nome this year. And then I have a personal story. Becca Moore, when she ran her rookie Iditarod, she was carrying one of the I don't know if they're promotional or if this is just something that Iditarod kind of like make a wish. If somebody asks, they find a musher to carry them. But there's a program called Beads of Courage, and they are a program that for children that have to be in hospitals, they are given these special beads for each procedure that they do, be it a surgery or a blood draw or what have you. They get to choose different beads for that process. And then they get to just string them. And so it's actually pretty amazing. And I didn't actually know about this program until my cousin's daughter, Ella. She was born missing part of her heart. So she really didn't live much outside of the hospital for her first year. And I get this text from my cousin one day, and she's like, "So you'll never believe it, but Ella just got some beads from the Iditarod Trail through Beads of Courage," and she sent me the picture, and it just happened to be from Becca Moore, and she and I are really good friends, or well, not really good friends, but we talk back and forth on Facebook quite a bit. So I sent that off to Becca, and it was actually really special and a way that it kind of connected my cousin. They live down in California. We don't see each other all the time, but it connected us in a way that during all of this craziness, it just kind of, it helps me feel like, at least I could be a part of it in a really roundabout way. And I know that Becca's not the only one that's carried beads of courage on the Iditarod. So there's quite a few. Mitch Seavy's carried ashes for one of his longtime kennel managers. So ashes are, I think, one of the big things. And I think Hugh Neff even carried something for a friend of his this last year on Iditarod. So there's a lot of little mementos that I think every musher carries, be it official or something personal.
And how is your family member doing now after all of that surgery and stuff?
Well, now I have to tell, the sad story is that Ella passed away right after her birthday, which is common for the syndrome that she had. They either do really well or they don't have a long life expectancy. But it was one of those things. She's still very much a part of our everyday talk and our everyday life. Her picture still hangs in my office at work. So not the happy ending that we were hoping for, but she's her family is beautiful and miss her, and someday we'll see her again and she'll be whole. So
well, thank you for sharing. I know that can be a tough thing to do for sure. So the trail mail, the promotional stuff, and of course all of the other things that people bring along, that includes a big part of the Iditarod process for a lot of folks. I know you talked about Hugh Neff, and it's my understanding that he was either carrying Hobo Jim's ashes or something of his along the trail. And even though he was withdrawn or scratched or whatever happened, he wanted to make it a point that he made it all the way to Nome one way or the other for that tribute to him. So people take it very, very personal when they're given this task to carry whatever it is and fulfill that promise to the family or to the classroom in terms of the trail mail or whatever. And of course, in terms of the trail mail, the kids just go crazy over that kind of stuff because it's a personal connection to them. And of course, they all have their favorite mushers. And if you do a school presentation, they can recite off all the big names. And we went to a school tour right towards the end of Iditarod this year. And I think it was the day after the winners came in or whatever, and we said to the little kids, I think that they were second graders if I remember correctly, we said, who is your favorite mushers? And every one of them raised their hand. Every one of them knew somebody different, and they all have their favorites. And that's something cool that's not just Alaska centric, but they do that all over the country, don't they?
They do, yeah, and I think it's actually international to different countries as well, or it can be. I don't know if it happens every year, but and that's how you're gonna keep interest in this sport. As much as it's an Alaska sport, we also want it to be a national sport and an international sport. And the best way to keep it growing and keep it alive is to make it come alive and make it real for these kids that otherwise are just reading about it in education curriculum and having to do weird math problems and read a bunch of book pages so that they can go down the trail and all of the fun little activities that teachers have come up with over the years to follow Iditarod. But when you get that letter from that musher or you get those booties from the musher, that just it amplifies and makes fans out of a lot of kids. There's a lot of fans that'll tell you, that they got interested in Iditarod because of a school project or because a musher came to their school. So it's a fantastic program. I love seeing it. I think most of the mushers enjoy it, other than the fact that, it's one more thing that they have to keep track of when they haven't slept in days. But I think overall they really enjoy bringing that to the kids.
Well, there you have it, guys. We are just about out of time, and we want to make sure that this is able to air on the radio station. Toni, it's a pleasure, and we'll talk again in a couple of weeks, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. On behalf of my co-host, this is Robert for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio.